So I don't know if you guys saw this, but this is Tim Walz went pretty viral here. 64 million views on this video here. Now I don't know what this is. This almost looks like he's doing a stand-up comedy set. That looks like the layout of this venue here. But he says if you need a little boost during the day, check out Tesla stock. So here he is.
This on the iPhone. They've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping. So
reminds me of Chris Farley in a van down by the river.
He definitely has a Chris Farley vibe going on.
He's definitely got a Farley vibe.
If Farley had not died,
yeah. Farley would have played Tim Walz on SNL 100%.
Absolutely.
Saying on my phone, I don't know, some of you know this on the iPhone. They've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping.
See, Farley would have nailed that line. 225 dropping.
And if you own one, we're not blaming you. You can take dental floss and pull the Tesla thing off, and take out, just telling you.
All right. So the takeaway from that is he's gloating about the failing of the Tesla stock, which of course made a lot of people very angry. Farzad replies, "You are a disgrace. I worked at Tesla for over 4 years. I know many who still work there. Tesla is one of America's crown jewels, and you actively want it to fail."
One of its ununionized crown jewels.
Yeah. Sounds like you want Elon's crown jewels in your mouth. You should be ashamed of yourself. You don't deserve to be anywhere near public service. Tim Pool, holy fuck. Minnesota has 1.6 million shares of Tesla in its pension fund. Tim Walz is such an evil man, he gloated over the collapse of his own constituents' retirements. Wait till you find out what Elon's plans for Social Security are there, Tim. Gonna have a much bigger problem than that on your hands.
Is this the Tim Pool? We never got around to it. Maybe we'll do it at some point. Is this the Tim Pool who, when his panel started talking about the USS Liberty, practically shit himself on the air?
Yeah, right.
And made the nonsensical statement that it didn't matter who fired the missiles? While his panel's jaws literally dropped. They had absolutely no idea how to respond to that.
I mean, later on in the stream, we're going to do a whole segment about how Ben Shapiro thinks it doesn't matter who killed JFK. It's funny how when, questions surrounding Israel's nefarious influence over the United States come up, that history doesn't seem to matter very much. He finishes this tweet out.
Well, we finally have our answer. Tim's hiding an APAC handler under that beanie.
Yeah, there you go. These people don't understand anything about economics. Now, he was actually quote tweeting Nick Adams, friend of the show, Nick Adams. Kevin O'Leary nails it on multiple points here. Anyone who lights a car on fire should go to jail, no exceptions. Tim Walz is a moron because of Minnesota's pension plan is backed by Tesla stock. So let's take a look at Kevin O'Leary on CNN.
When you set a car on fire, you should go to jail. You're a criminal. I don't think we have to talk about it in any other context. And all those cars have cameras in them, and those dealerships have cameras.
Now, keep in mind, they're talking about Tim Walz, who did not advocate for vandalism against Tesla. He's simply rooting for the stock to fail. But this is where he goes.
You're beyond being stupid when you do that. You're going to go to jail, and you now have a government that just got their mandate. They can't wait to find idiots that do this. You're going to spend 5 to 20 years in prison. If they get them on terrorism, which I think is a stretch, they will have no parole, no shortened sentence. They'll rot in hell in prison for 20 years. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, that's okay.
That's okay. So you just said you thought it was a stretch that they would be convicted on terrorism and rot for 20 years with no possibility of parole. But then you're saying it's really not a stretch in your mind because you're saying you're perfectly okay with that. So, it's funny how these people object to being called fascists. That's really funny, as we're going to see demonstrated even more.
Well, and I can't speak for O'Leary, but so many people who are completely on board with applying terrorism charges to people who vandalized Teslas were the same people who were advocating to pardon the January 6th,
of course,
crowd. Which, hey, we were for that. But a little consistency there.
Yeah,
I mean, undoubtedly they did vandalism on the Capitol. Isn't that worse than doing vandalism on a Tesla. I mean,
Well,
last I
it was
heard, it's
vandalism
worse,
with
right?
the intent to disrupt a transfer of power. Like, they clearly intended. I don't think they intended to overthrow the government. That's why I didn't think it was an insurrection. I didn't think it was domestic terrorism. But they clearly intended to disrupt the transfer of power. That's clearly a politically motivated act of property damage, right? So if you're applying one standard to one group, why don't you apply the other standard to the other group? No, it's absolutely shameless. But now he starts talking about Tim Walz again.
Breaking in, shooting a car, setting on fire, nothing to do with the politics, nothing to do with Tesla. You are a criminal. And you should go
the broader
to
question
jail.
about
well,
the protest
that's why we
factor.
have laws like that.
That's why we have laws against vandalism.
We have laws
and things
against
like that.
right. This is not like a something that's up for debate.
Right.
Nobody's really debating that. The question is really overcharging them with terrorism. Something that I would think all these J6 advocates would be sympathetic to. The idea of you shouldn't overcharge people for this.
Right. Exactly. 20 years without parole for keying a Tesla.
That's totally reasonable. That's reasonable. Like you don't sound like the British guy who gets his comeuppance at the end of the movie in a movie about the oppressive colonial government. Yes, well, we will take these natives and we will string them up until they learn their place.
Protest. You're a criminal.
I'm talking about Tim Walz and his comments about the Tesla stock. He says it gives him a boost to see that stock going down.
That poor guy didn't check his portfolio and his own pension plan for state. It's beyond stupid what he did. He's talking down a 3.5% weighting in his own pension plan. I mean, what's the matter with that guy? He doesn't check the well-being of his own constituents in his state. I mean, that's their investment fund. Point, what a bozo.
Oh, my God.
Well, Donald Trump certainly shares this opinion. This is hot off the press. This is from this morning. Trump says, I look forward to watching the sick terrorist thugs get 20-year jail sentences for what they are doing to Elon Musk and Tesla. Perhaps they could serve them in the prisons of El Salvador, which have become so recently famous for such lovely conditions. That was posted to Donald Trump's Truth Social, 7:43 a.m. Eastern time here in the United States. No, not
now,
fascistic at all.
Grubby little commoner.
Yeah.
You'll work my fields for pittance and you'll be thankful.
Not fascistic at all to threaten vandals with torture in a foreign prison. No, they're not fascist. That's exaggerating. Mario Nalfa. Okay, so this is where MAGA is really latching on to the idea that Minnesota has pension investments in Tesla, and so how dare he, governor of the state, put his own citizens at risk in this way. Governor Tim Walz openly celebrates watching Tesla stock plummet, apparently unaware or unconcerned that his own state has nearly 2 million Tesla shares in pension funds. Yes, that is right. Who's really upset about this too is Minnesotan friend of the show, our old pal, Dean Phillips, who apparently thinks he looks cool sporting the scruff. Either that or he's auditioning for the new film Escape from Duluth. But here he is talking about how he does not recognize his party
escaped
anymore.
Dark Crystal puppet Dean Phillips.
Yeah, exactly. So here he is talking about how he's ashamed and appalled by what Tim Walz said and how he doesn't recognize his party anymore. Former Congressman Dean Phillips from Minnesota.
I really don't recognize my party. I don't recognize its principles. I surely don't see any leadership. I don't want to give full credit to President Trump for breaking the Democratic Party, but it surely is in disarray and, most importantly, completely rudderless. And what I saw my governor and friend Tim Walz say today was appalling. And I don't want it to mean any individual directly, but I'm just shocked that someone who should know better read the room so poorly. I liked him for a long time.
Yeah.
I liked him for a long time. What a phony piece of shit this guy is. Obviously, we have a little history together. I'm sure he remembers me, not by name, but by face.
All that we're missing were the pearls for him to literally clutch.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it looked like you read the room okay. It seemed to go over well in the room, that bit. Certainly wasn't a failure there. And the idea that you're going to feign outrage over this, I mean, it's such a pathetic.
But this is nonsense. And by the way, and just as you said earlier, What you said about cheering the tanking of Tesla stock, not only does that hurt a lot of Minnesotans who have their money in pension funds, it hurts Tesla employees. This is one of the world's foremost innovative companies based in the United States of America. No elected official should ever demean an American company like that. It's nonsensical. And then to call him a South African Nepo baby. He's an American citizen for 20 years.
Wow.
He's built some of the most extraordinary companies in the world.
Look at this fucking guy.
And call him what you will. You can disagree with his initiative, Doja. But my goodness.
Doja.
For my party.
Doja. What bridge you been living under? Doja. Who the hell calls it Doja?
To be, should be condemning it, should not be celebrating it. I'm really appalled right now and shocked.
What a phony piece of garbage this guy is. What a disgraceful piece of garbage this guy is. The idea that you can't root for an American company to fail is just absolute nonsense. I don't know is there a chapter in Capitalist Realism about how the population becomes brainwashed to value the well-being of corporations over the well-being of human beings? It seems like something that, might fit nicely into that book. But that's certainly what he's pushing here. And the Elon, man, well, who paid this guy? This guy was a Democrat, and now he's out of office.
I mean, was he though? Was he though?
He is fucking wow.
I mean,
wow, he was
always
a lot of
this
Elon ball
douche.
riding. Yeah,
that's part of why you had that exchange with him.
Oh yeah. Oh, just a total two-faced bastard, a Jewish supremacist and white racist who claims to be concerned for the lives of the Palestinians. Meanwhile, just regurgitates every Zionist talking point you can think of. But that's a topic for another segment. But I would like to point out.
Well, this part of I saw somebody the other day who was making a point I agreed with. You do have, I don't think that's always the case, but you do have certain non-white people who will join the Republican Party, I believe, or women, people of different genders, because it's a shorter line, because they love to grab those people and push them to the front. Right. Oh, look, we have somebody who doesn't look like they just walked out of Triumph of the Will in our party. So yeah, it's a shorter line than in the Democrats, where you're going to be much more commonplace. I think you get that a lot with these why I left the left types. I mean, if you're just going to be a Democrat and you're going to have standard neoliberal centrism views, and you're just a dumpy white guy, they got a million like you. But if you start to edge over to the other side, hey man, worked for RFK, worked for a lot of people in the media space, the why I left the left thing.
Well, also don't forget, Dean Phillips is no longer in Congress. He ran for president in the primary against Joe Biden. He kind of fell out of favor with a lot of the Democratic establishment because of that. Don't forget, there is offer on the table from Elon to fund the primaries of centrist Democrats versus radical left Democrats.
Right,
so if he ever wanted to run for office again, a check from Elon would help tremendously, because he burned Biden, so he's not going to get a check from any high-ranking Democrat. So maybe he's fishing in that pool, because that's was just point. Shameless Elon dick riding there. Now, as for this point, because, we want to be fair, we want to represent all sides of the argument here. For Tim Walz, he's the sitting governor of a state, and he's attacking Tesla. And a lot of people in his state apparently rely on the economic well-being of Tesla, which is a terrible thing for the governor of a state to pick a fight with a company that so many in the state rely on for their income, isn't it? DeSantis's retaliation against Disney hurts Florida, former governors and lawmakers.
That's not a Korean company. Disney's an American company.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I remember when he did this, obviously, he got huge backlash from a lot of conservatives, right, at the time. Cody Johnston makes this point very well, sarcastically. I can't believe Tim Walz is rooting for an American company to fail. Something that I, a modern American conservative on X, the everything app, have never done. Yes, exactly. So, obviously, the Disney example is a recent one. Mermaid expert Matt Walsh defends translucentism. Made a lot of money off of that clip, 118,000 views, bitching about a black Little Mermaid. He seemed to back DeSantis and his war on Disney. Even now to this day, even with the DeSantis-Disney spat kind of in the rear view, here's the quartering. Woke Disney Plus loses 700,000 subscribers in just 90 days due to woke propaganda and price gouging. So they seem very keen to root against the success of a great American company when it suits their political purpose. Who could forget this? Benny Johnson.
And just to say, I would say there's nary a pension fund in the country that does not hold Disney stock.
Yeah, that's probably true as well. Yes, absolutely. Who could forget the Bud Light and the Target boycotts? Now, I know Russell warned me that Bud Light was apparently acquired. Anheuser-Busch was acquired by, I think, a Belgian company it is. But Anheuser-Busch still a major employer of great Americans. And Target is, of course, an American company based in Minnesota. Minnesota, the poor people of Minnesota. Are you really going to take out your political grievance on the poor people of Minnesota? Well, yes, they were happy to do that when it came to Target. But, of course, it didn't stop there. Ben & Jerry's faces MAGA boycotts as recently as January 2025 because they refused to suspend their DEI program. Now, to be fair, you should have some context. Ben & Jerry's based in Vermont. You have to pay black people more in Vermont because there's at least a 4-hour commute for black people since there are hardly any black people living within 4 hours of the state. So that could explain some preferential treatment that they might get there, which is totally understandable. How about this one? Conservatives are going after Ford's very old, very gay Raptor. That was in, 2022? How about this one? Remember this one? Conservatives are posting videos of themselves smashing their Keurig coffee makers to smithereens amid the Sean Hannity controversy. This was when Sean Hannity interviewed Roy Moore, the fan of the playground running for Alabama Senate, and Keurig pulled their advertising from his show. And, of course, the Chuds had a meltdown about that, going as far as to vandalize Keurigs. Now, granted, they were vandalizing their own, so it's not technically vandalism, but they were still doing some property damage to a wonderful company. Who could forget the Colin Kaepernick boycotts against an all-American business, the National Football League? Yes, of course. What about this one? Suburban women ditch Nordstrom and go on a cash-waving rampage to support Ivanka Trump. A viral video shows a group of women storming into a Nordstrom to cancel their accounts in response to the retailer's decision to stop selling Ivanka Trump's fashion brand, promising to shop at Dillard's instead.
We shall overcome.
Kellogg's, that's right. Many on the right organized a boycott against Kellogg after the cereal brand announced in November 2016 that it would no longer advertise on Breitbart in an effort to ensure our ads do not appear on sites that aren't aligned with our values as a company. And of course, remember pretty recently when the conservatives wanted to boycott an entire city, New York City? That's right. Remember this guy, Chicago Ray, who in response to the indictment of Donald Trump decided he was going to rally truckers around boycotting deliveries into New York City.
Hey folks, your old pal Chicago Ray. I've been on the radio talking to drivers for about the last hour 15 minutes. And I'm talking to at least 10 drivers going the other way. I'm heading down from Southern Wisconsin. And they're going to start refusing loads in New York City starting on Monday. All right? I got about 3 drivers that I drive with. They already vibrated the boss and told them they ain't going to New York City. So, I don't know how far across the country this is or how many truckers are going to start denying loads to going to New York City. But I'll tell you what, you fuck around and find out. Okay? We're tired of you motherfucking leftists fucking with Trump. Okay? Motherfuckers are starting to get tired of this shit.
Motherfuckers are starting to get tired of this shit, he says. And they led a boycott of an entire city. I remember all of MAGA wanted New Yorkers to starve because of the prosecution against Donald Trump. So, of course, I mean, this is just one of those examples where, I mean, you wonder why they even bother. Why they even bother expressing this outrage over rooting for a company to fail. And it really is. I mean, you talk about a peasant mind. You talk about people just so pathetically brainwashed into idolizing rich people and entrepreneurism. The fact that this little bit here.
I know some of you know this on the iPhone. They've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping.
Get your panties in a bunch over rooting for a stock to fail, as if this doesn't happen all the time in every direction. I mean, boycotting companies, actively trying to make companies fail. I mean, this is a tradition, that goes back as far as we can remember on just about all sides of every issue. I mean, the go woke, go broke boycotts to the BDS boycotts. This is a part of how people can express themselves collectively, especially when electoralism fails. So the idea that there's anything un-American about it is just absurd, and the meltdown especially pathetic in this case.
Well, I think part of what's so dangerous about our current moment, and the reason you're not going to address it with an election, you need a total cultural change and probably some kind of change in mores and possibly regulation around technology, is you have a society, and particularly, I think, younger people who have grown up inured with smartphones and computers are particularly overwhelmed by this. There's no politics for most people. There's emotional pornography. That's all it is. It's just designed to stimulate people's hate, fear centers. Everyone's been turned into a Jerry Springer studio audience. Yeah, I don't do that. I do this. Yeah,
Right.
that's me. That's me.
Right.
Yeah, I don't do that. I do that. Right? Like there's no critical thinking. It's just absolutely moronic. No better than the libs, no better than the MSNBC people, these people who just reflexively will parrot whatever Elon tells them is the outrage of the day, or the whatever Benny Johnson tells them. They're no different than the people who watch Joy Reid. They're exactly the same people. They're exactly the same people. The personality type, the mindlessness, the reflexiveness, the ad hominem nature of their critiques, just absolutely no critical thinking skills at all. Not even enough to stop for a second and say, oh yeah, I did call for a boycott of Target.
Right,
Oh yeah,
exactly.
that was me.
Yeah.
Like, they're not, but I mean, and the MSNBC people are the same exact way in their hypocrisy, with these Orwellian formulations of saving free speech by censoring, like they're both just mindless. Like, whatever they're told, they'll just run with it, man. And there's no problem with hypocrisy on both sides, because they're so completely plugged into this artificial network of influencers and media ecosystems that will never hold them accountable for their own hypocrisy, because that whole ecosystem is hypocritical in the same way. I mean, it's one of the major, if not the defining driving force in making people comfortable with that kind of double thing. Somewhere in your brain, you called for boycotts of American companies, but it doesn't matter, because they're just going to tell you this is the thing to be outraged by today. It's very sad. It's very dangerous, because we are in a moment where justly people don't trust the old institutions and authorities anymore, and for good reason. For good reason, yes. All of these outlets, the Washington Post, the New York Times, they've all shown their ass. They've shown their biases. They've emphasized political affiliation over objective reporting. Absolutely. But now, what? The cure to that disease is to believe what oligarchs, billionaires, and the people who serve them tell you to think? Wow.
Well, also, I mean, what is especially dangerous about this moment too is it's a moment of escalation, in the sense that the in-party right now is just completely doing away with any restrictions to their power. So, you know, this kind of gamesmanship, this kind of Machiavellianism has always been, you know, part and parcel of politics in general. When you have a system in place, that system is meant to impose certain guardrails to keep things within certain bounds. Once you do away with them, now the only thing that matters is who is in power.
Right.
Because there is no system to rein in whoever is in power if these people have their way. Now, of course, Trump and Elon are running into problem after problem and court ruling after court ruling, and we will see how the system holds under this weight and what the next move of the executive is. Pardon me. But once all bets are off, in other words, once there are no guardrails, now it's just power politics, and at that point, hypocrisy doesn't matter because principle doesn't matter. It's not a question of principle anymore. It's a question of who has power, and whoever has power can use it however they like, whether it's consistent with any overarching ideal or not. There's no need for that kind of pretense in this kind of no holds barred, dog eats dog kind of cage match.
Right. Whoever's holding the levers of power define truth in very Orwellian fashion. I think this is part of what a lot of people have not understood on all ends of the political spectrum. The idea of a society that has overarching constitutional constraints and ideals that rein in power, that's a very fragile and delicate thing to maintain. And all parties in the political spectrum have had their hand in bringing us to where we are now, where things are really hanging by a thread. And I think partisans on all sides have done their part to question the legitimacy of having those overarching rules by way of justifying their political agenda, like the so-called people on the left and liberals who poured over articles arguing with a straight face, well, maybe the First Amendment is obsolete. Well, okay. All right. Well, look what you opened the door to, idiots. That once you start to leverage power in that way, well, your political opposites are going to do that as well, and vice versa, until you've destroyed something that is very fragile and frankly very unusual in human history. What we are reverting to is much more typical. A very well-armed central authority that's going to impose its will on the great bulk of people. That's what you're reverting to. And that's what a lot of people are cheering for without even understanding that that's what they're rooting on.
Please clap.